I didn't think a dog breed could expose the cracks in my relationship like a spotlight. But the night Tristan looked me in the eyes and called me heartless, I felt something inside me go very still, like my body understood, before my mind did, that this wasn't just an argument about a puppy. It started so casually. We were in our apartment, the kind of ordinary weekday evening where the air still smelled faintly like detergent, and the only sound was my cat, Mittens, padding across the floor like she owned the place. Because she did. I'd just gotten home from the clinic, still wearing that tiredness that seeps into your bones when you spend all day watching animals struggle to breathe, to heal, to survive. Tristan was on the couch scrolling his phone, smiling like he had a surprise tucked behind his teeth. "I've been thinking," he said, too cheerful. "I want to get a bulldog puppy." My stomach dropped before I even spoke. Because I'm not someone who read an article once. I'm the person who holds brachycephalic dogs when they panic for air. I'm the one who watches owners cry when they realize surgery is the only way their dog can breathe like a normal animal. I'm the one who cleans infected folds, treats chronic allergies, and hears the same sentence over and over. I didn't know it would be this bad. I tried to explain it gently at first. I really did. I told him what I see. I told him what it costs. Money, time, suffering. I offered a compromise, a healthier-bodied dog, maybe an adult rescue, something that wouldn't be born already fighting its own anatomy. And Tristan dismissed me, like my daily reality was just an opinion. Then he got angry, said I was shutting him down, said I didn't care about what he wanted. And when I finally said the line that came out sharper than I intended, "If you do this, I'm not paying your bills again, and I'm not carrying this dog on my back," Tristan grabbed his keys and walked out. A few hours later, my phone buzzed. A message from Zach, our mutual friend, calling me controlling, calling me cruel, calling me heartless. And that's when I realized this wasn't only about a bulldog. It was about who Tristan becomes when he doesn't get his way, and who I become when I finally stop rescuing people who keep choosing chaos. I'm 28. I work as a lead veterinary technician at a local animal clinic, and I've been in this field for over 6 years. Long enough that my hands can place a catheter by muscle memory. Long enough that I can read fear in an animal's eyes the same way you read weather in a sky. My job isn't just cute puppies and kittens. It's late-night emergencies, families making impossible decisions, and the constant hum of responsibility. It's the weight of being the person who stays calm when everyone else is falling apart. I've learned how to speak softly while holding an animal still. I've learned how to smile while my heart is cracking. I've learned how to go home with the smell of disinfectant in my hair and try to pretend I'm a normal 20-something with a normal life. That's probably why I loved Tristan when I met him. He was light. Tristan is 27, the kind of guy who walks into a room and makes it feel warmer. He's spontaneous and funny, always the first one to suggest ice cream at midnight, always the one who can make a bad day feel smaller just by being near you. When we started dating almost 2 years ago, I thought his impulsiveness was charming, like he was teaching me how to breathe again. We moved in together about 8 months ago. It felt like the natural next step. We were happy, we were comfortable, we fought rarely, and when we did, it was over stupid things like whose turn it was to take out the trash. We had a system that worked. We split the major bills, rent, utilities, groceries, and kept our personal money separate. I liked that. It made me feel safe, like we were two adults building something together instead of one person carrying the other. And for a while, it stayed that way. But there were little signs I ignored, because that's what you do when you love someone and you don't want to believe the warning lights mean anything. Tristan didn't budget. Not in a sometimes I splurge way. In a money disappears and I don't know where it went way. Takeout almost every day. Expensive coffee like it was oxygen. Random purchases that came in little brown boxes he acted like I shouldn't notice. And then there was his mother. I didn't know much about her at first. Just that Tristan would tense up when her name popped up on his phone. He'd step into another room to answer. His voice would go careful, like he was walking on glass. Sometimes after those calls, he'd come back looking annoyed and quiet, and I'd ask, "Everything okay?" He'd shrug. "Yeah, she just needed a little help." And by help, he meant money. At first it was small amounts. She's short on rent. Her car needs repairs. She has a medical bill. Every story was urgent. Every request came with guilt attached, and Tristan responded like he'd been trained to. I tried not to judge. Families are complicated. I told myself, he's a good son. He's kind. He cares. But then the little help started affecting our life. There were 2 times he couldn't cover his share of the bills, and I stepped in without making him feel ashamed. I told him it was fine, that we'd figure it out, that everyone hits rough patches. The problem didn't feel like a rough patch. It felt like a pattern, and even with that, even with the irritation I swallowed, I still believed in him. I believed that if we kept building, he'd grow into the responsibility. I believed we were still on the same team. Because when Tristan was good, he was good. He'd rub my shoulders when I came home sore. He'd make me laugh until I forgot what I was stressed about. He'd scoop Mittens up and pretend he didn't like her while she purred like she owned his chest. It felt like a real life, a shared life. So when he announced, out of nowhere, that he wanted a bulldog puppy, an animal I see suffering in my hands every week, it wasn't just surprising. It felt like a test of whether Tristan was capable of making a thoughtful choice, or whether he was still the kind of man who chased a feeling and expected me to clean up the consequences. The more I replay that conversation in my head, the clearer it becomes that the bulldog wasn't the beginning of the conflict. It was just the moment everything underneath finally surfaced. After Tristan told me what he wanted, I didn't shut him down right away. I asked questions. Real ones. The kind you ask when you're trying to understand, not win. Why a bulldog? Why now? Have you thought about the costs? Financially, medically, emotionally? His answers were vague. Shrugs, half smiles, a casual, "I've always liked them." That alone set off something uneasy in me, because this wasn't how Tristan usually approached decisions that mattered. When he wanted to switch shifts at work or buy a new phone, he'd research for days, compare prices, read reviews. He'd ask my opinion. He liked feeling prepared. But this was impulse wrapped in nostalgia I didn't yet understand. I explained my concerns carefully. I told him about brachycephalic airway syndrome, how these dogs are born with compromised breathing. I told him about the surgeries, the lifelong medications, the emergency visits that come in at 2 a.m. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't dramatize. I spoke the way I speak to clients at the clinic, honest, calm, grounded in reality. Tristan waved it off. "Not all bulldogs have those problems," he said. "We'll find a good breeder." "You don't actually know that will happen." That sentence hit harder than he realized. Because I do know. I know because I've held dogs who couldn't cool themselves in summer. I know because I've watched families empty savings accounts trying to give their pet a life that should never have been that hard. I know because this isn't theoretical to me. It's daily. What hurt wasn't just the dismissal of my expertise. It was the way he said it, like my lived experience was just another opinion to debate. I tried to shift the conversation. I suggested alternatives. Healthier breeds, mixed breeds, adult dogs from shelters. I explained that puppies require time and consistency we might not realistically have with our schedules. That's when Tristan's tone changed. He crossed his arms. His voice tightened. "So basically, you're saying no." I told him I was saying not like this, not without a plan, not without acknowledging reality. He accused me of controlling the decision, said I wasn't considering his feelings, said I was acting like I had veto power over his happiness. And suddenly the argument wasn't about dogs anymore. It was about authority, about whose voice mattered more, about whether my boundaries were reasonable or selfish. I brought up money. Carefully, reluctantly. I said I was worried about costs, especially since I'd already helped cover his bills before. I said I didn't want to end up responsible for an animal I hadn't agreed to. That's when I said it. The line I knew would change the temperature in the room. "If you do this," I told him, my voice shaking despite my effort to stay calm, "I won't help financially anymore, and I won't take responsibility for the dog. I won't bring it to my clinic for discounted care." The silence afterward was sharp. Tristan stared at me like I'd betrayed him. He didn't argue back. He grabbed his keys and said he needed air. The door closed harder than it needed to. I sat there on the couch, mittens curling against my leg, my heart pounding in that familiar way it does when you realize you've crossed a line you can't uncross. I wasn't proud of the ultimatum, but I also knew something important. For the first time in our relationship, I hadn't softened the truth to protect his comfort, and that scared him. A few hours later, when Zach's message popped up calling me heartless and controlling, the pit in my stomach deepened. Because now it wasn't just between us. Tristan had taken our private conflict and handed it to someone else, stripped of context, stripped of my reasons, stripped of my reality. And that told me something I hadn't wanted to see before. This wasn't only about an impulsive decision. It was about how Tristan handles disagreement and who he turns into when someone finally says no. The apartment felt too quiet after Tristan left. Not peaceful, hollow. I sat there longer than I want to admit, staring at the door like it might open again if I stared hard enough. Mittens hopped onto my lap, kneading softly, completely unaware that something fragile had just fractured in her territory. I pressed my hand into her fur and tried to slow my breathing. I kept replaying the conversation, looking for the moment where I could have changed the outcome. Maybe if I'd been gentler. Maybe if I hadn't mentioned money. Maybe if I hadn't said the word won't. But beneath all those maybes was a quieter, steadier truth. I had finally said what I'd been holding back for months. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. For a second, my heart jumped. I expected Tristan's name, an apology, a "we need to talk," something to pull us back from the edge. Instead, it was Zach. I almost didn't open it. Zach had been Tristan's best friend long before he was anything to me. We'd hung out plenty of times. Game nights, birthdays, lazy Sundays. I thought we were on good terms. Friendly. Safe. The message was longer than I expected. It didn't start aggressive. That almost made it worse. He said Tristan was really upset. He said Tristan felt shut down and unheard. He said I was being kind of controlling. Then came the line that made my chest go cold. Honestly, this feels pretty heartless. It's just a dog. My hands trembled as I read it again. Heartless. As if my entire career, my literal life's work, was a lack of compassion instead of an overflow of it. As if standing between an animal and unnecessary suffering was cruelty. As if boundaries were the same thing as punishment. I didn't respond right away. I couldn't. My emotions were tangled. Anger, hurt, disbelief, all pulling in different directions. What stung the most wasn't Zach's opinion. It was knowing how that opinion got there. Tristan had told his story. Just not all of it. He hadn't told Zach about the medical realities. He hadn't told him about the financial strain. He hadn't told him about the times I covered his bills. He hadn't told him about my job, what I see, what I carry. He had taken the version where he was wounded and I was rigid, and he let someone else judge me from that incomplete picture. That realization landed heavier than the argument itself. This wasn't just a fight between partners. This was the moment I understood that when Tristan feels cornered, he looks for validation, not understanding. And he'll get it wherever it's easiest. I didn't cry right away. I cleaned. I organized the kitchen drawers. I folded laundry that didn't need folding. I did everything except sit still with my feelings. Eventually, exhaustion won. When Tristan finally came home later that night, it was past midnight. I was in bed, lights off, pretending to sleep because I didn't trust myself to speak without unraveling. He slipped in quietly, didn't touch me, didn't say anything. That silence felt louder than any argument. The next morning, we spoke in fragments. Morning. Coffee? I'll be late tonight. We orbited each other like strangers who knew each other's routines, but not their hearts. At work, my coworkers noticed I was off. One of the vets asked if I was okay. I lied automatically and said I was just tired. But when I held a French bulldog later that day, struggling after exertion, eyes wide, chest working too hard for too little oxygen, I felt something inside me crack open again. I thought of Tristan. I thought of that hypothetical puppy. I thought of how easily people romanticize animals without understanding the cost. And I thought about how often women like me, practical, informed, cautious, get labeled cold for refusing to participate in someone else's fantasy. That night, Tristan finally asked if we could talk. Not apologetically, not defensively. Carefully. We sat at the table, the same one where we'd eaten 100 ordinary dinners, and for the first time, I saw something different in his face. Not anger, not charm. Fear. And I realized this conversation wasn't going to be about bulldogs at all. It was going to be about something buried deeper. Something neither of us had named yet. We sat across from each other at the table, the space between us filled with all the things we hadn't said yet. Tristan rubbed his palms together like he was trying to warm them. I noticed little details I usually ignored. The way his knee bounced under the table, the way he avoided my eyes at first. This wasn't the Tristan who joked his way out of tension. This was someone bracing for impact. I didn't mean for Zach to text you, he said finally. I just needed to talk to someone. That sentence landed softly but wrong. Because talking to someone isn't the same as handing them a version of events where I become the villain. I told him that, calmly. I told him how it felt to be judged by someone who didn't know the whole story. How it felt to have my work, my ethics, reduced to a lack of compassion. Tristan listened, really listened. He didn't interrupt, didn't argue. That almost hurt more than if he had, because it told me he was finally seeing the damage. I was overwhelmed, he said. It felt like you were shutting down something that mattered to me. I took a breath. I chose my words carefully. I wasn't shutting you down. I was drawing a line. I told him what it feels like to carry responsibility every day. For animals who can't speak, for owners who don't understand what they've signed up for. I told him how exhausting it is to watch suffering that could have been avoided with different choices. I told him that I couldn't come home and pretend those realities didn't exist just because he wanted something cute and comforting. He nodded, eyes fixed on the table. Then he said something that surprised me. I think I overreacted because it felt personal. I asked him what he meant. That's when the conversation shifted. Tristan told me there was a bulldog when he was a kid. His name was Max. He said it quietly, like saying it too loudly might break something. Max had been there during years Tristan didn't like to talk about. Years when his house didn't feel safe, when affection was unpredictable, when love came with conditions he didn't know how to meet. Max was the only thing that didn't judge me, he said, voice thick. He was just there. I watched Tristan cry for the first time that night. Not dramatic sobs, just tears slipping down while he tried to keep his voice steady. I felt my chest tighten. I hadn't known about Max. I hadn't known about that version of Tristan, the kid who learned comfort from a dog because people failed him. For a moment, guilt washed over me. Had I been too harsh, too clinical, too quick to shut the door without seeing what was behind it? But then something didn't add up. I asked him, gently, about Max's health, about vet visits, about care. Tristan frowned, thinking. I don't remember him ever going to a vet, he said slowly. My mom always said he was fine. He showed me photos his mother had sent recently. I didn't even need to zoom in to see it. The cloudy eyes, the posture, the tension in the body. Signs I recognize instantly. I didn't dump that on him all at once. I explained carefully what those signs meant, what they suggested. As the realization dawned, Tristan went very still. He remembered things then. Max collapsing after play, lying down longer than normal, being told he was just tired. A child believing what he's told because he doesn't know there's another option. I didn't know, he whispered. And that was the moment everything changed. This wasn't about wanting a bulldog. It was about trying to rewrite a childhood memory, trying to reclaim comfort without confronting the truth that it had come with hidden suffering. Tristan apologized for dismissing my knowledge, for going to Zach, for calling me heartless. I wasn't ready to hear you, he said, but you were right. We talked about boundaries then, about money, about his mother. I told him I couldn't keep covering for him while he sent money to someone who treated him poorly. I told him I needed him to choose us, not just emotionally, but practically. This time, when I gave an ultimatum, it wasn't out of anger. It was out of clarity. He didn't argue. He sat with it. He agreed to set boundaries, to stop sending money, to consider counseling. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired, hopeful, guarded. Because growth is possible, but patterns don't break overnight. And as I lay in bed later, listening to Tristan breathe beside me, I knew one thing for certain. This relationship was no longer on autopilot. And whatever came next would depend on whether his remorse turned into action or faded the moment things felt comfortable again. Change never announces itself loudly. It arrives in small, uncomfortable moments, the kind that force you to choose between old reflexes and new behavior. The days after our conversation felt strangely calm on the surface. Tristan was attentive in ways that felt deliberate. He cooked dinner instead of ordering takeout. He showed me his bank app without me asking, pointing out where he'd started tracking expenses. He even brought up the idea of talking to a counselor on his own, not as a promise to placate me, but as something he said he needed. I wanted to believe him. Still, I didn't relax. I'd learned, through work, through life, that intentions don't heal wounds. Follow-through does. 3 days later, the first test came. Tristan's phone rang while we were folding laundry. I watched his shoulders tense before he even looked at the screen. My mom, he said quietly. He didn't leave the room this time. That alone felt like progress. I didn't listen closely at first. I tried to give him privacy without physically leaving, but guilt has a sound to it, and I recognized it in his voice, the careful tone, the pauses where he was clearly being pulled back into an old role. When he hung up, he didn't pretend everything was fine. She needs money, he said. Dental emergency. The word sat between us. In the past, this would have ended with Tristan transferring money and me finding out later when he couldn't cover rent. This time he looked at me and asked, "Can we talk about it?" We did. I asked questions, calm ones. How much? How urgent? What exactly the procedure was. Tristan didn't have clear answers. His mother hadn't given him details, just urgency and guilt wrapped in a familiar script. I told him I wasn't telling him what to do. I was telling him what I couldn't keep doing. Tristan sat there for a long time, staring at his phone like it was something dangerous. Then he typed out a message, telling his mother he couldn't help financially anymore and that he needed space. He showed it to me before sending it. I nodded. He hit send. I didn't celebrate. I watched him brace for impact. The fallout came fast. Missed calls, texts escalating from pleading to accusing, reminders of everything I've done for you. Tristan read them silently, jaw tight, and then, something I didn't expect, he blocked her number. I can't do this anymore, he said. Not like this. That was when Zach re-entered the picture. He came over a few days later, awkward and visibly uncomfortable. Tristan had apparently confronted him about the text he sent me. Zach apologized, directly, sincerely, but admitted he'd only heard Tristan's side and had jumped to conclusions. I accepted the apology, but trust doesn't reset instantly. I kept my distance. Then Zach said something offhand that changed everything. Your mom asked me for money too, he said to Tristan, for medication. I watched Tristan's face drain of color. Medication? He asked. She told me it was dental. Zach frowned. That's weird. She said it was urgent. Silence stretched between them. After Zach left, Tristan sat down heavily and rubbed his face with both hands. That night, he called his aunt, his mother's sister. I didn't hear the whole conversation, but I heard enough. Long pauses, sharp inhales, a voice cracking on the other end. When he hung up, Tristan looked like someone who'd just watched his childhood rearrange itself. She's been doing this for years, he said. Lying, manipulating, taking money. Then came the worst part. Maximums. His aunt told him the truth, that when Max started having health problems, his mother refused to take him to a vet because it was too expensive. That help had been offered, that it was declined. Tristan sat on the floor after that, back against the couch, staring at nothing. He suffered, Tristan whispered, and I didn't know. I sat with him. I didn't explain. I didn't analyze. I just stayed. The next morning, Tristan blocked his mother everywhere. No contact. Not as punishment, but as survival. A week later, he did something that surprised me again. He came home with a donation receipt for the Special Needs Animal Fund at my clinic. I want to do this every month, he said, instead of sending her money. I didn't cry, but something inside me unclenched. Weeks passed. Tristan stayed consistent. He cooked. He budgeted. He didn't ask me for money. When his mother showed up at his workplace, he didn't engage. When she called from new numbers, he blocked them. Then I brought home Buster, a 10-year-old mixed-breed dog from the shelter, temporary foster, dental surgery recovery, calm, gentle. I asked Tristan if he was okay with it. He said yes without hesitation. Watching him care for Buster was like watching a different man. He followed medication schedules. He researched senior dog care on his own. He created a spreadsheet, unprompted, budgeting for future vet costs. When adoption came up, Tristan didn't rush. We talked, at length. He showed me his savings, his plan. And when he finally adopted Buster, it wasn't about nostalgia. It was about responsibility. Growth doesn't erase the past. But watching Tristan choose differently again and again told me this wasn't just a phase. It was a turning. Still, I stayed cautious. Because escalation doesn't always mean collapse. Sometimes it means clarity. And clarity demands a choice. I didn't realize how tired I was until things finally slowed down. That's the strange part about living in constant tension. You don't feel the weight while you're carrying it. You only notice it when you finally set it down and your arm starts shaking. For weeks, I had been holding my breath, watching Tristan closely, waiting for the old patterns to resurface, bracing for the moment when effort turned into resentment. On the surface, everything looked better. Tristan was doing what he said he would. He stayed no contact with his mother. He stuck to his budget. He took care of Buster with a gentleness that surprised even him. But underneath that progress was grief. And grief has a way of finding you when the adrenaline wears off. One night, I woke up to the sound of Tristan sitting on the edge of the bed, breathing too fast. He didn't realize I was awake at first. His shoulders were hunched, hands gripping his hair, like he was trying to hold himself together physically. I reached out and touched his back. He flinched, then leaned into me, like he'd been waiting for permission to fall apart. I keep seeing Max, he said hoarsely. I keep thinking about how long he was hurting. There it was. The truth he hadn't had space to feel yet. Cutting off his mother hadn't freed him. It had unsealed everything he'd been trained to ignore. The neglect, the manipulation, the realization that love, for him, had always come with conditions. I should have known, he whispered. I should have protected him. I told him something I'd learned the hard way at work. You were a child, I said. You trusted the adults who were supposed to keep you safe. But grief doesn't care about logic. For days after that, Tristan moved through the apartment like someone underwater. He still did the right things, but mechanically. His laughter disappeared. His eyes looked older. I worried. Not about the dog, not about money. About whether this reckoning would swallow him whole. Then came the barbecue. Zach invited us over. Casual, low-key. I almost said no, but Tristan wanted to go. Said he needed to feel normal. Buster came with us. Halfway through the afternoon, Tristan's mother showed up. Uninvited. She walked in like she belonged there, carrying a bag of gifts, smiling too wide. When she saw Tristan, she acted like no time had passed, like she hadn't been blocked, like nothing was broken. Then she saw Buster. She laughed, dismissive, sharp. You're wasting money on an old dog now, she said. The words hung in the air. I felt Tristan stiffen beside me. For a split second, I saw the boy he used to be, the one who learned to swallow pain to keep the peace. Then I watched him choose differently. You're not welcome here, he said calmly, and you don't get to comment on my life anymore. He took Buster's leash, took my hand, and we left. In the car, Tristan's hands shook on the steering wheel. I didn't collapse, he said quietly. I didn't beg. I squeezed his hand. That moment should have felt like a victory. Instead, it cracked something open. Because standing up to someone who controlled your sense of worth your entire life doesn't feel empowering at first. It feels like grief. That night, Tristan admitted something he hadn't said out loud yet. I don't know who I am without her voice in my head. That scared me. Not because it was wrong, but because it was true. And because rebuilding an identity is harder than cutting someone off. I lay awake later, staring at the ceiling, Buster snoring softly between us. I loved Tristan, but love doesn't erase fear. What if this was too much? What if the progress collapsed under the weight of his past? What if I became his anchor instead of his partner? I knew my boundary. I would not become the person who holds someone together at the cost of myself. The darkest moment isn't always a fight. Sometimes it's the quiet realization that love alone isn't enough unless both people are willing to face the truth and keep walking through it, even when it hurts. And I didn't know yet if Tristan could. The turning point didn't come with fireworks. It came with a spreadsheet. I woke up one morning to the soft click of keys and found Tristan at the dining table, laptop open, Buster asleep at his feet. The sun was just starting to push through the blinds, turning dust motes into something almost gentle. I couldn't sleep, he said when he noticed me watching. On the screen was a budget, clean, detailed, deliberate, monthly expenses, savings goals, an emergency fund, a separate line labeled Buster, medical reserve, another labeled therapy. He looked nervous, like he was waiting for a grade. I booked an appointment, he said, with a counselor. First sessions next week. Something in my chest loosened, not relief exactly, but recognition. This wasn't performative. This wasn't guilt-driven. This was choice. Over the next few weeks, I watched him do the work in quiet ways. He cooked instead of ordering out, not with resentment, but with intention. He checked in before decisions instead of after. When his mother tried to contact him again, from a new email address this time, he showed me immediately, blocked it, and went for a long walk with Buster until his hands stopped shaking. He started therapy and came home after sessions drained, but clearer, like someone finally cleaning out a room they'd been afraid to enter. He didn't dump it all on me. He didn't ask me to fix it. He told me what he was learning. That I confuse urgency with love, he said one night. That I learned early to prove my worth by sacrificing comfort, he said another. That saying no doesn't make me cruel, it makes me honest. Then came the moment I hadn't expected. He asked me to sit down, not to argue, not to negotiate, but to listen. I need you to know something, he said. If you ever feel like this relationship is costing you your peace, I want you to say it, and I want you to leave if you need to. The words were steady, not dramatic, not self-pitying. I don't want to be someone you have to manage, he continued. I want to be someone who stands next to you. That was the moment I believed him. Not because he said the right thing, but because he removed the trap, the unspoken obligation, the fear that my boundaries would be used against me later. We talked about the future carefully. Not grand plans, just principles. No rescuing each other from consequences. No triangulating conflicts through friends. No animals brought into our lives without mutual consent and a plan. No money sent to family that undermines our stability. We didn't promise perfection. We promised honesty. A month later, we adopted Buster officially. The paperwork felt ceremonial in a way I hadn't expected, like marking the beginning of a different kind of care. Tristan took primary responsibility, proudly, methodically. When Buster had a follow-up appointment, Tristan asked questions I usually had to prompt partners to ask. He took notes. He followed through. At a small gathering, weeks after the barbecue incident, Tristan's mother tried once more, showed up uninvited, attempted to act normal, criticized Buster again. Tristan didn't raise his voice. He didn't explain. He simply said, "This isn't happening," and left with me. In the car, he exhaled and laughed once, soft, incredulous. "I didn't even feel guilty," he said. That's when I knew the shift had stuck. The turning point isn't about winning an argument. It's about choosing alignment over appeasement, responsibility over fantasy, care that costs something over comfort that costs someone else. For the first time, I wasn't watching Tristan try to become someone else. I was watching him become himself. And for the first time in a long while, I wasn't bracing for the other shoe to drop. I was standing on solid ground. The fallout didn't explode. It unraveled. Quietly at first, then all at once. Tristan's mother didn't accept the distance with grace. She accepted it with stories, with tears aimed at the right audiences, with carefully chosen words designed to make her look abandoned instead of accountable. Friends of friends reached out, distant relatives. Even a coworker of Tristan's mentioned, awkwardly, that his mother was worried sick about him. Each time, Tristan didn't correct the story publicly. He corrected it privately, with his actions. He didn't return calls. He didn't argue. He didn't explain himself into exhaustion the way he used to. He simply lived differently, and that difference spoke louder than any defense. Zach noticed it first. He pulled Tristan aside one night and said, "You're different, calmer." Tristan shrugged. I stopped trying to be who she needed me to be. Some friendships shifted after that. A few people drifted away. The ones who preferred the old version of Tristan, who bent easily and absorbed blame. Others leaned in, curious, respectful. I watched it happen without intervening. This wasn't my battle to fight. At work, something changed for me too. I stopped second-guessing my boundaries. When clients asked about breed recommendations, I was firmer. When coworkers vented about feeling mean for saying no, I told them the truth. Compassion without limits isn't compassion. It's burnout. At home, life grew quieter. Not emptier, quieter. Buster settled into a rhythm. Slow walks, soft beds, deep sleep. Tristan paid his bills early. He started saving for a future instead of escaping the present. We reviewed finances together once a month, not as a power move, but as a partnership. And then there was the last attempt. Tristan's mother showed up at our apartment while he was at work. I opened the door because I didn't recognize her car. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She smiled. She told me she was worried about Tristan, that he seemed confused, that he was throwing away his family over a misunderstanding. She said she forgave me. That word, forgave, rang wrong in my ears. I told her calmly that she needed to leave. She accused me of controlling him, of replacing her, of turning him against her. I told her something I hadn't planned to say. "I didn't take anything from you," I said. "I just stopped giving you access to hurt us." She left in a fury. When Tristan came home and I told him, he didn't panic. He didn't spiral. He thanked me for not engaging further and sent her one final message, clear, brief, unemotional, stating that showing up uninvited was unacceptable and would have consequences. Then he blocked her again. That was it. No dramatic showdown, no reconciliation montage. Just the truth settling into place. The fallout for her was isolation, confusion, a loss of control she didn't know how to survive. The fallout for Tristan was grief, but also freedom. The fallout for me was something unexpected, peace. Not the fragile kind that depends on everything going right. The steady kind that comes from knowing I didn't betray myself to keep someone else comfortable. I didn't win. I didn't teach anyone a lesson. I simply chose not to participate in suffering that could be prevented, whether it belonged to an animal or a person. And in doing so, I found out who was willing to walk forward with me, and who needed me small to feel powerful. 3 months later, I'm sitting on the couch with a warm mug in my hands, while Buster snores between Tristan and me like he's always belonged here. He has gray around his muzzle, a stiff step in the mornings, a soft, trusting way of leaning into touch that still makes my chest ache in the best way. Tristan scratches behind Buster's ears absent-mindedly while reviewing a spreadsheet, our spreadsheet, one that includes savings goals, emergency funds, and space for the life we're building instead of the one we were surviving. We aren't perfect. Tristan still has hard days. Therapy digs things up. Sometimes grief ambushes him when he least expects it. But he doesn't turn that pain outward anymore. He He doesn't numb it with impulse or hand it to someone else to fix. And I don't shrink to keep the peace. That's the real ending. Not the dog, not the argument, not even the growth. The ending is two people choosing accountability over comfort, again and again. I've learned something important through all of this. Boundaries don't make you cold, they make you honest. Loving someone doesn't mean enabling the parts of them that harm themselves or others. And protecting the vulnerable, whether it's an animal, a partner, or your own peace, is not cruelty. It's responsibility. If I'd stayed quiet, we might have gotten the puppy. We might have smiled through vet bills and emergencies and resentment that slowly poisoned everything good between us. Instead, I spoke up. I drew lines. I let discomfort do its work. And because of that, I didn't just save myself from burnout. I watched someone I love finally learn how to care without causing harm. Buster shifts in his sleep and lets out a soft, ridiculous snore. Tristan laughs, the sound easy and real. This wasn't a story about a bulldog. It was a story about trauma, choice, and the courage it takes to say no when saying yes would cost too much. And the lesson I'll carry forward into my work, my relationship, my life is simple. If your compassion requires silence in the face of suffering, it isn't compassion at all. Sometimes love sounds like a boundary, and sometimes that boundary is the thing that finally lets everyone breathe.